July 31st, anniversary eve. Beautiful day, quiet. Good stroll here. So I know I'm responding to the impulse. Wasn't on the agenda. In fact, my agenda is pretty packed in on that, out on a job. Working and developing the business. Carolina installations. A lot of web work. Learning new skills. Coding. SEO optimization. Writing. And I'm beginning to turn the corner on what was once New Thought coaching. And that is just because of my own unfolding and my own understanding of self that's morphing into something else. And I'm changing the name to get it closer to what's actually happening. So I've changed the YouTube channel name from coaching to the unfolding self. And I think it better reflects what the teaching is about, what the experience is about. And yeah, it's good. And I'm growing slower than I want. Change comes slower than I want. But it is happening. And I know moments like this, it's basically the self, taking the self out for a walk. Clear the pipes and slow down. It builds up sometimes. In the process of doing it feels like the doing is the thing. And the doing is really not the thing. The doing is a byproduct of being. And sometimes just being out and smelling nature, seeing the reflection of the sun on the water, walking in the shade of dense green foliage, trees. Well, I can't speak for anyone else. For me, it anchors me back into the present. And it reminds me that there's no urgency here. The only urgency is the tension that the lower part of me would import. The little I would demand different results, different timetable. But really in the spirit, living in a conscious awareness of grace, a couple of things present themselves. Is the truth of self-completion. The true self, the singular self, is complete and whole, not given to anxious moments and thrusts of energy, but simply being. And that is myself. And what I've been chewing on lately is the heavy concept paradigm of oneness and its implications. And they're staggering and meaningful. And I think it's easy to give mental assent to the concept of oneness than it is the actual application of it, the actual ownership of it. This morning I was spending some quiet time with myself and my thoughts and some noodling on ideas here, revolving around oneness and presence. And I saw the gap between knowing something and having that something become a part of consciousness, to cause consciousness to expand. And becoming that something, that's a different animal, a different thing. And the process that came to me that I've been chewing on since that time early this morning was in regard to what I call truth, recognition of truth. What is truth to me? And I recognize it, for truth is actually not really taught or transmitted. It's recognized by the infinite self that's already the self. And yeah, there is some deceptive shenanigans going on with the mind to convince us that there's separation. that there's God, and it's in complete violation of oneness. And by oneness, for more traditional students, you'll hear it better as non-dual. There is a difference between knowing the truth. Joel Goldsmith calls it the letter of the law, and a worthy pursuit to know the truth, to read the scriptures, not just the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, but the world scriptures, scriptures of evolving humanity. It's of truth everywhere. And the Spirit will take what it needs for where you are and begin to anchor those ideas. But believe me, when I tell you as a guy with over a decade in the rearview mirror on the metaphysical path, there was some meandering, and not everything I encountered stuck, not everything I encountered resonated as truth. I didn't recognize it as truth. Some of it I grew into, but even then, there has to be another component attached to the recognition of truth, and that is the realization of truth. And so, I guess the teaching, the warning, is to not think that you can read your way into change, progress, enlightenment, unfolding, improvement. All those things are good, but there's a sharp, clear distinction drawn between human goodness and spirituality and spiritual reality. The flesh and the spirit are at odds to each other, and flesh and blood will not, cannot inherit the kingdom. It's not about flesh and blood. It's about spirit. And the Father's looking, seeking, finding those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. And I guess because of my education and my insecurities, I spent a lot of years wrapping an intellectual fig leaf around my insecurity and thinking if I know more, I'll be more secure. If I know more, I'll be protected. I'll be safe. I'll be tended to. I'll be prosperous. I'll be happy. I'll be at peace. Those things don't equate, for all the reading, book consuming, and lecture hearing, ingestion of words, thoughts. Much of my humanity has remained bound, unchanged, and not really emancipated from the things that weigh me down in this world. This world is not the kingdom. This world is the paradigm that the Master Teacher Jesus overcame. He overcame the world. And that's this sense-bound world. And the opposite, the contradistinction to the world is the kingdom. Behold, the kingdom is within you. So says the greatest teacher, the greatest expression of truth ever to grace the planet. And so thinking about this morning, thinking about you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I believe that. I believe that teaching is solid. But I don't think it's just the knowing the truth. The exposure to truth, the letter of the law, must yield to the spirit of the law, the spirit of the word. It's good to know these verses. It's good to know metaphysical paradigms. It's good to know what the spiritual people said about certain topics, and that's recognition. But recognition needs to eventually yield to realization. Realization. That's a funny word to me. It is a verb. It is something to do. And it's doing something about that truth that has been presented and is in your intellect. It's in your mind. But as it resides there, it doesn't mean that that is the truth that will set you free. The truth that will set you free is the truth that is both recognized and realized. realification, like to make it real. And no one will do that for you. No teacher can do that. No guru can do that. However, quick caveat, they certainly can aid in that attainment as you come under the influence of their deepened and advanced consciousness. There will be benefit, and that's not woo-woo. This is an implication of oneness, because what it means is there is one God who is all, who is in all, and who establishes the form and substance of all. And God is one. And so as we enter another consciousness, an advanced consciousness, we become benefactors of it. And we can feel the uplift, the inspiration. We can yield the benefits of it in terms of enlightenment, in terms of health and healing, in terms of supply and addressing needs. But it can't be sustained like that, nor is it supposed to. It is to bridge the gap as you come to your own realization. And when you come to your own realization, that recognized and realized truth will become your demonstration. And what is demonstration? Demonstration is the output of this process. It is what shows up in time and space, in form and matter, to demonstrate sound health, perhaps where there was malady, to demonstrate supply, perhaps where there was lack, to demonstrate harmony where there was discord. To demonstrate is the output of realization. And that realization is only triggered by recognizing truth. So I just gave it to you forwards and backwards. But the polarity is in one direction, is recognizing truth. The prerequisites there are to filter through scripture, statements, promises, warnings, quotes, ideas, paradigms, concepts. They're all over. Many people have put them out into the atmosphere. I'm doing it right now. And your mind, with its gatekeeper intact, is going to it will only let in what you will find resonance with, what you can recognize as truth as you're going through this journey. Some of that has to do with the current state of your awareness, the current state of your consciousness, and the strength and veracity of the gatekeeper. Now, so I just throw another term at you. Let me give you a quick synopsis of the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is that little voice in there that has been monitoring what can come in, what can stay, what feels right, what you reconcile as true and acceptable versus what you just can't receive, what you need to reject. And I had an old curmudgeon-y prison guard type gatekeeper from the old evangelical model that, boy, if it didn't line up to the doctrine, to the dogma, it wasn't coming in. It was corralled, it was labeled heresy, apostasy, false teaching, lie, deception, error, whatever. I'm not saying that the gatekeeper is bad. I'm saying the gatekeeper is not well informed. He was actually informed by you, but there's going to have to be a number of conversations about the paradigms of truth and some reconciliation to what can be allowed in. Now, I came out of evangelicalism a little beaten, still, a little disillusioned, discouraged, and I kind of walked out of the light of all things spiritual for a bit. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't fruitful. It was fun every now and then, but in terms of my soul, my spirit, my mental health, it wasn't a great time. There were just pockets of carnal pleasure, and I was taking in self-help, and that was pretty non-threatening. But even then, the gatekeeper would rise up, and if something got a little too woo-wooey, a little too spiritual, gatekeeper would come in and shut that down and, move on to the next. And the gatekeeper is the one who ultimately sorted out what's goat, what's sheep, what's meat, and what's bone. Sorry for the heavy breathing I had to fill here. And it's no joke today. So in Beyond Orthodoxy, my first book, I talked a lot about, or I addressed the concept of eating the meat and spitting the bones. And the truth is it's a process. And what you can eat today will be different from what you can eat in the future. By eat, I mean ingest in terms of ideas, thoughts, concepts. And that should be the case. There should be an expansion. There should be one idea solidifying, giving birth, and making way for another. This seems healthy, normal. But the gatekeeper needs to be coached, trained, educated. So the gatekeeper is not the thing that needs to die daily. It needs reformation, for sure. But it's the other ideas. The other ideas from the lie, the insecure I, the cobbled together I, the early education I, the I that had a lot of influences and people writing over it, giving it its operation instructions. And then the gatekeeper comes up as a psychological safeguard. And so again, I say it's not wrong. And it's not safe to abnegate discernment, your responsibility for ideas. And you can't believe all things, because quite honestly, some things are in stark contradiction of one another and they force you to choose. And so that's part of the gatekeeper's job description. It's applying that discernment, working the creative filters, making sure the gauges are right and balanced. But that's changeable, and it should be. But anyway, as I was coming in to metaphysics from evangelicalism, it was, I was reading a lot of stuff, and a lot of it didn't stick. A lot of it was just too woo-woo for me for where I was. But some other pieces, my soul recognized as truth, and I kept them. And they kept coming back, and they kept showing up, and they kept bringing stability, mental stability. But again, let's not confuse mental anything with spiritual anything. Those two ideas are different. Spiritual is not mental. Mental is not spiritual. Again, in Beyond Orthodoxy, I talked about these levels and band of psychic activity, the reality of our personality and psychology, which all fall below, if you were stacking up the levels conceptually, they all fall below spirituality and what you are and who you are spiritually. And so there is some metaphysical teachings that really get very focused on improving conditions, improving health and wealth and happiness. And when I came in, moving beyond some self-help, because that's what I was trying to do in self-help, is to get these human improvements, feel better, feel happier, have my bank account stable and full and flowing, have my relationships prospering. These are all human improvements, but they don't reach the heaven that Jesus taught about. He talked about a kingdom that was not of this world. All of those things I just mentioned are all part of this world, all part of our humanity. And our humanity will not endure this experience. It will not transcend it. That is the work of spirit. Now, there's a part of you that, in my opinion, for sure will transcend this flesh and blood experience, because that's the way we're made. Whether we recognize that truth or not, that is, in my opinion, an immutable piece of God's expression in us, through us, as us. And that's a tough one to choke down, especially for old school evangelicals who came out of that model, or old school Orthodox Christians. It's really challenging. So, do we want improved humanity? Yep. Should that ultimately be the goal we're looking for? I submit to you, no. I submit to you the real target is above that. The real target is a vibrant spirituality, a Christ-realized presence, not just better relationships and more money, nicer car, bigger house, more friends. Again, I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I'm saying every one of those things fall short. Have our minds transformed, have our minds renewed. So I'm on this scale, on this trajectory, like everybody else. Still got to put me back in the oven. It's still squishy at parts and I'm not fully baked. Here we go. And, what I'm acknowledging is the fact that you can know some things and call it truth, but it doesn't yield the harvest. It doesn't yield the freedom and emancipation that Jesus talked about when he said, you shall know the truth. That truth shall make you free. It will. Eventually, it will. When it goes from recognized truth to realized truth. When it moves into demonstrated truth. Which for sure is transient. It's here today. That form and vision will collapse, another one will form and rise up in its place. And could very well just all be on a upward trajectory. Maybe it meanders. Some days good, some days bad. The point of meditation and the topic that I'm getting at is to take this recognized truth, whatever you have, much or little, but I would take little, but I would take it into the silence. I would take it into meditation. I would take it into contemplation. And I would keep thinking about not knowing it, but realizing it. Bring it into its realization stage through contemplation, through meditation, through understanding, through experience. Recognition, then realization, then demonstration. Ultimately leads to an expansion in consciousness and further illumination.